So, how's everything over there?
It's great, man. It's late here, so looks a little dark in here. Apologize for the lighting, but man, we're trying to make the lighting look a little better now. I look like I'm being on a film set. So, how are you, man?
Everything's good. Everything's good. So, first of all, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yeah, my name's Brent Pourciau. I'm I'm in Covington, Louisiana, and I'm in my I'm like 46 years old, and I've been running top velocity for about 15, 16 years after my playing career. So
So, 46, you said?
yeah.
Looks like something like 32 or 33.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think I got good genetics. I think genetics helps. A lot of my family looks they stay pretty young, but
So, I've been following your Instagram probably like for years. I can't remember
oh, thanks.
when did I start it, but I'm in Taiwan, so never had a chance to go there and visit you. But I really love your content on the you post on Instagram.
Thank you, man.
So today's question probably be based on the the post on your Instagram, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
So the first question is can you I know it's a big question, but can you try to uh explain it to us the mechanics for pitcher of pitching?
You kind of broke up, so you want an
Oh,
overview of like pitching mechanics.
yeah. Ex-
So
yeah, go on, go
the
on.
method the method that I apply here at Top Velocity is using the kinetic chain. So the kinetic chain is that your body is a bunch of links of segments to each other. So like your shin links to your thigh, and your thigh to your pelvis to trunk, and all the way up. And forces are created in the ground, and we create ground forces, and then those forces move into our body, and then we use the kinetic chain to create kinetic forces or kinetic energy, and then we funnel that energy up, and then all the way into the ball, and then it releases into the ball. And those forces we can use in our body are driving forces and rotating forces. And we're trying to optimize everything. So we have to learn the timing or the sequencing, kind of like dominoes falling, to make sure that we optimize the energy that we got out of the ground and accelerate it up through every segment of the body of the kinetic chain, so we can get the most energy production at the very tip or the end, kind of like a whip. So that's the overview of it, and within there we can define, and I've defined all these different positions and movements that that would define how it all works to get that optimal result of 100 miles an hour with 2,700 RPMs, or degrees per second of spin.
So in on your Instagram, you like talk about separation between shoulder and the hip. How does that how does that work, and how why is it so important?
Because like a whip. So if you took a whip, you know what a whip is, right?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that what I'm talking
yeah.
about? So if you took a whip and you just spun a whip around, you'd probably, all you would hear is it just cutting through the air. You just hear the right. And
Yeah.
all the whip is doing is it's all moving in one direction. But if you took the same whip and you changed the direction, you brought the whip up and then you quickly reversed it and brought it down very fast, it would force the end of the whip to have to move so much faster to keep up that at that point you would crack the whip, which is breaking the sound barrier. So that's how much faster a change of direction can force acceleration. So just like in your body, if my hips are going really fast forward and my trunk is staying back, we call that hip to shoulder separation. That change of direction can force the end to accelerate so much faster than if you just pulled it all around together.
Cool. So all that is like for to create the whip, right?
The quicker acceleration. Yeah.
Cool. So in order to like make it like a whip, you must have like a strong upper body, right?
No. If you let's go back to the whip. The handle of the whip is the bottom of it, and you have to have a strong, arm to hold the whip. But if you compare that to the body, your arm holding the whip would be your legs pushing the hips, because all the length at the end is what's accelerating. So it's your legs in the ground that's pushing your center of mass, your pelvis. And then you're creating on the counter movements, like in the whip, the change of direction to then enhance above that energy your legs created. So you have to be strong, but you really want to be strong and powerful down below.
Cool. I always thought that although you need to have a stronger lower body, but in order to have the effect of the whip, the core muscle, the upper body must be strong too.
It does. I mean, it has to be, but that's not like everything has to be strong, but the power comes from below. And the acceleration or the ability to put a lot of force into it comes from below. And then your upper body has to be strong and coordinated to then accelerate off of that. So, I mean, it's hard to say one should be stronger than the other. Everything should be strong, but the most important thing is the legs, because if you can't get energy into the body, then you don't have a lot of energy to accelerate out of the body.
Cool. I love this because like I've been training like baseball player for years. And here in Taiwan, we used to like do like a lot of like strength work for the lower body. And anyway, just increasing the strength. But sometimes I don't know if that kind of like how much of strength work can like help my players for the uh pitching velocity. So the next question is like does improving the lower body strength really gonna help us like increase their pitching velocity, and how much of the strength is needed? And besides strength, what else should we be doing?
Yeah, so strength is an ambiguous term, and it sometimes doesn't really define the athleticism that we're talking about. So you really, it's better to think of it this way. Strength is force, and say let's put that here, and then and if this is a spectrum, on the other side let's put speed. So really speed is activation, it's not force. So these are really different. That's why we're putting them on the opposite side of each other. But when we put them together, we get something called power, and that's the ability to activate force. To the ability to peak forces through activation. So it's how quickly we can create force is this pinnacle of both. And that's power. And that's really what we're trying to get to when we're doing something like that's a speed measurement, like velocity is a speed measurement. So it's hard to get to velocity with just force. It's hard to get to velocity with just activation. It's really that combination that we want. And there's more physics in there. But the point is when it comes to training and developing something in you, improving something in you, you would actually get more benefit of improving the power, not just the strength or not just the speed. It's the combination. So you got to make sure in your training, you're training strength, you're training speed, but you're also training that combination of them in power, because you won't see great results just training strength or speed. You'll see much better results training power. And training power means using lifts or movements that force you to move a load, a weight, because more weight, more force, quickly. And for example, you could get someone really strong and they could push a refrigerator across the room, but if it took them like 15 minutes, that's probably just a measurement of strength. If they push it across the room in 1 minute, then that's a measurement of not just their strength, but their power, because their ability to activate that more quickly. So that's what we're trying to get to. You got to make sure all your training is doing that. It's not just forcing them to activate force. It's forcing them to activate force as fast as possible. So, and then how much of that? I mean, the sky's the limit. You really want to get, I mean, obviously you'll feel like you never have enough power, because at the end of the day, people want to throw 115 miles an hour, so power is something that you'll never feel like you have enough of.
So in order to like create enough like power, so that's where like things like ankle kick, that kind of things like work, right? So all these like
So because
yeah,
well, the kicking of the ankle that's an extension that creates force. But once again, it'd be the ankle kick, an explosive ankle kick, meaning not just you pushed force, but you pushed it quickly. That would just be a technical or biomechanical or an explanation of how you would create force and how you would create power, really.
So on your Instagram, you usually like when pitcher get to you, they usually like increase like 5 mph?
Yeah, 5
right?
to 10 miles per hour. Yeah, y'all
Yeah.
use kilometers, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I'm thinking like how much is
yeah.
that?
What if that is? I don't even know. So
So uh how how exactly did you do to like increase the speed of the pitching?
so you're basically, it's simple. You're increasing force to the ball. This is a clean fuego ball, but velocity means I put more force in the
Yeah.
ball at release. So how do I do that? I amplify power. So I use my body to push off the ground, to counter and sequence movements up to where I apply a bigger force at the end. So things that I will do, I will improve mobility with an athlete by training mobility, because now mobility is time or distance. Now I'm giving them more distance to create more force. And when you give someone more distance to create more force, you give them more time to accelerate. You still have to be powerful, but it gives you more time. So when you improve mobility in an athlete, you give them more time. And when you give them more time, they can now accelerate higher. And then I help them develop strength. Well, strength is your ability to hold positions and get in positions and, hold forces like torque. And then I improve through lifting and training. And then I improve speed by helping them activate their movements and time and get in the positions at the right sequence. So we can hit the leverage points for force production. And a leverage point is a point where you create force. So if I create force, you know, if it's like this ball, if I want the ball to go that way, but if I'm trying to create force like coming this way, it's going to work against, I'm going to lose energy that because it's going in the wrong direction. So the better I leverage and get in the right positions at the right time, I can create more forces in the direction that I want the forces to go. And that's through the quickness to be able to hit those positions at the right time as you're creating force. And then I help them develop the power, put it together to where it's not only activated quickly, but it's also driven by a lot of force. So I help them put it together, and that's power training. And then we do biomechanical training. So we actually then teach them the leverage points positionally, like if a pitcher can sit well enough in the back leg and get the shin linear. Now, when he goes to drive, all that ground force goes towards the ball, which means now we have more energy to more easily transfer to the object we're trying to accelerate. So it's just physics. You're using all these components of physics through your training to help them improve. And as they put it together and enhance it, their velocities start to climb up.
So, increasing their mobility, so increasing their overall strength, speed, and power. But after increasing their mobility, or after increasing their mobility, strength, and power, how to make sure or how to like correct their sequence of their movement.
Well, that's the biomechanical training using drills. So you use drills to segment, to isolate parts of the movement. So it's easier for them to work on those specific movements to make a change. If they're trying to just work on everything, it's too much. It's too distracting. It's too complicated to fix specific problems. So you have to have drills that put them through simpler movements of the delivery to improve those positions, the timing, sequencing, the force production. And then over time, you can start building back the full delivery and getting the better result.
Can you like give us an example? Like, if there's, let's say, if one of my player, they have like tight TFL, and I want when he pitch, I want him to like create force through the lower body and to have a like great hip extension, but the front side of the hip just doesn't too tight, or even after I like give him like myofascial release, they couldn't do a great like hip extension. How?
Well, yeah. With mobility, like tightness can be weakness, and it could be weakness in other areas of the body, and those muscles are tightening for stability due to the weakness in the opposing areas. So like the quads will tighten up when the glutes get weak and the hamstrings get weak. So if you could release the fascia or even the central nervous system, but it's just going to tighten back up because that's how it stabilizes. So you have to not only, release release the trigger points or the fascial system, and lengthen it, but you got to also strengthen the opposing muscles to allow the IT or the quad to relax, because you're right, the quad is actually connected, or the rectus femoris is connected into the pelvis. So if it is tight, you will not extend your hip well. So you have to get someone to start to load in their glutes and their hamstrings and get out of that anterior pelvic position, neutralize their pelvic. So and the glute creates the stability. Now the quad can relax. And now when they come out of their leg lift, they can sit back as opposed to forward. And so their quad's still more relaxed. And now when they open and drive, now their quad can extend, and now their hips flex, or their hip extension will improve. But if they're always just loaded in their quad, it just rolling it out or working on the fascial system isn't always going to do the job.
So loading back, like sit back, load their hamstring and their glute, so they can produce the optimal pelvis rotation. Am I right?
Well, because the quad, you take the load out of, as much of the load out of the quad as you can. Now the quad can stretch because it's not under tension. And now as you drive and open your hips, that quad can stretch, the hip can extend, and now you're creating pelvis rotation.
Cool. Love this. That question kind of bothered me for like half a year.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Yeah, if you don't understand the mechanism, like your quad is probably just active because you're in that posture and you're putting all your weight there. So you can't turn it off. It doesn't matter how much you roll it. You got to change your posture, and sometimes to change your posture, you got to change your muscle strength and what muscles are active.
Cool. So here's a question for the other post on your Instagram. Is you mentioned like front side pitching versus like back side pitching. So what exactly is like front side pitching, and what exactly is like backside pitching?
Well, I talk about it like, if you think of a door, you could open a door in two ways. You could, let's say close the door. You could close the door in two ways. You could push from behind the door, or you could pull the door closed. Your trunk's the door. Your trunk's got to open. You can do the same thing. You can push from behind the trunk let's think of the door again, to close it, even though it's opening. Or you could pull the trunk around. So when I push from behind the trunk, that's my back leg. It's my back leg pushing my hip around, and then that brings my trunk around. Or I could fail to do that, land, and then use my glove to pull my trunk around. You're going to find it's way more effective because there's way more leverage and muscle power to push from behind than it is to pull around from the front side, which can be more in the upper body and more in the glove side.
So for all those pitchers you've been training, does those high level athletes always know how to work like what you just mentioned, like the whip, or how? Yeah.
No, I mean,
yeah.
Well, a high level athlete to me just means they have some elite characteristics or elite traits. And that could be size, that could be any of those components: size, mobility, power, speed, motor control. There's something in them that's very elite, but it doesn't mean that they have things in them that are very below average. And a lot of them do. They just have this one or two or three things that are just so elite, and it allows them to get away with a lot. So I think you do find, I mean, if you looked at like Division I college baseball players, and then you looked at Major League Baseball players, you wouldn't find like much better movers at the highest level as far as like just athleticism, but you would find guys that I believe have some real like high level characteristics or high level abilities that have put them there. So the point is, like, I could work with a college athlete who's actually doing better at putting the whole thing together than a major leaguer. But that major leaguer just has some real elite abilities that is allowing them to separate themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course, of course. So for all those like athletes, is there like different like movement pattern for the pitching, or probably like different sequencing, or like different, or it's all the same?
Yeah, like I said, there's a study that showed good little league pitchers had the same mechanics as good big league pitchers, but the big league pitchers threw like 15-20 miles an hour harder, which is a lot, right? So the lesson was the little pitchers are just smaller versions of the big guys, so they don't have they don't have, like, it'd be like taking a jet and then taking a little toy jet. It could even be built this proportionately the same, but because it's a smaller scale, it doesn't have the power of the big jet. So the point is, you find that a lot. You find amateurs that can move very similar to the elite players. They might even be the same height as the elite player, but there's real things lacking in there. Like, going back to what I was saying, that the elite guys have. The elite guys just have this like insane mobility or this insane speed that they were gifted with. That's really the separator. But the lesson is that the amateurs are the ones that don't have those real elite gifts. They can get there by being more well-rounded than those players, by not having deficits, being more above average across the board. That gives them the edge above those elite players.
Great, cool. So pitching is not just a rotation movement, it also is very asymmetry, right? You have to push off one leg and decelerate at the other leg. So when it when it when you're gonna train like strength, or like train probably like power, does that affect you do the strength training programming, or it doesn't matter?
Yeah, no. Well, here's the thing. Every player should be working on every aspect of the elite pitcher. And that's, every player should be working on mobility. Every player should be working on speed, strength, power, mechanics, motor control. Every player should be working on that. Where it gets customized or specific to an individual is when they start to develop that base across the board and they see things improve, and then they start finding that some things are improving at a slower rate than others. That's when you start to get more specific into their needs. But people make a mistake that the specificity should be in the beginning phase. It should not be. The beginning phase should be building a base across everything. The specificity should come in when they advance and they're trying to get to their peak potential. And that should be later, after they've really started to plateau their base development.
But overall, it's still a symmetry movement. So is there gonna be like if we still do things like back squat, we don't like do like rotation movement for the other side, is that going to like increase their chance to get injured?
Well, injury could come in building strengths and ignoring weaknesses. So you can do that in your training. So like, say if you take an amateur player and you evaluate him and he has some average strength, speed, but he has real deficits in mobility. Like he has super tight hips, super tight ankles, and you ignore that, or you barely work on that, and you go to his strengths, his speed, and you overemphasize that. The injury starts to show up when you push your strengths well above these deficits of weakness. So you're right. If you're not making sure your training is keeping you more well-rounded and allowing your weaknesses to get better and your strengths not to too far exceed your weaknesses to keep a balance, you typically will be healthier. But what typically happens is someone who falls into injury, sometimes injury is just inevitable, or it's based, if the stress you're putting on your body is so much, it doesn't matter how well-rounded or how trained you are, you're probably still going to get injured. So you have to regulate your stress management, but you will find majority injury is linked to a weakness that was either ignored, not identified, or poorly understood.
So I want to like go back to the whip effect, okay? So does like every athlete, every pitcher you train has the whip effect? Is there any time they're going to use their like upper body more? And
So
yeah.
if someone can't apply the kinetic chain well or the whip effect well, they're overcompensating, meaning, for example, if the hips don't rotate well, now that kills the counter rotation acceleration of the trunk. So they want to throw hard with that failure, so they go to the front side. They start pulling to help finish rotation. And then that can cause the arm to get out of sequence and drag. And then usually that's when injury becomes more probable. So yeah, people do that. You see it all the time. It's all the way up at the major league level, and that's usually where injury comes from. But the thing is that I don't ever believe it's acceptable to allow an athlete to overcompensate or use overcompensation in their movements unless they've done everything possible they can to fix their problems and they've technically, hit a wall. That would be the only time I would support them overcompensating.
So basically, it's the kinetic chain, the overall movement is basically about the same, right?
Yeah, we all have two arms, two legs, a head, and a trunk. So we're all going to do it pretty much the same way. It's just everybody within that anatomy has differences. Like my muscles are bigger than yours are smaller. My joints are tighter than yours are looser. I'm height, I'm longer. Those differences make the patterns different. But at the end of the day, we're all the same human beings trying to do the same thing. So we're going to be pretty close to the same movements. Or I think at this point in the evolution of baseball, we've come up with probably one of the best ways to throw something really hard. It's just now getting better at understanding what we're doing so we can optimize it better and specific to each individual with all their intricacies and differences.
Cool. Love this.
Cool, man.
So, last question, okay? So, in order to throw that fast, does that cause like great risk for the shoulder and the elbow? Because there's always pitcher have like injury in their shoulder and their elbow. So how to like prevent that?
So you go back to the whip. So the joints at the end, the end of the whip, they go the fastest, right? And they're also smaller. So the muscles are smaller at the top. So where there's more speed and less mass, those are the joints that are more prone to injury. And the more you use it at higher speeds, the better chance of injury. Strength is the real equalizer. The stronger you are, the better chance you can survive. So hands down, strength's the equalizer across through the whole body. But there's limitations. Like there's limitations in the elbow, because what holds the elbow from popping out of socket when your arm lays out, one of the things is the UCL. It only holds like a slight majority of the stress. The muscles take care of the rest. But it's proven that this ligament can't go much past, like in miles per hour, like 85 miles an hour. I don't know, that's in kilometers, but that's the maximum velocity it can handle where it starts to risk rupture or tearing. So you really, like, people will always say, well, I can throw all the time. And it's usually because they don't throw hard enough. There is a certain level of velocity that you're finally at severe risk of injury. And that's for miles per hour, that's around 85 and up, or 80, somewhere 80, 85. So the point is like, once you get to those velocities, you do need to start being more aware to how your body's breaking down, to what stress it can handle, to how well you're moving to support putting less stress on the end. And typically there's more stress at the end when you're trying to use the end to create the velocity as opposed to translate or funnel the velocity. So there's the best way to deal with injury is three ways. It's strength, get stronger, throw less at less velocities, like conserve throwing, and get better at moving to distribute the stress. So if you can do those three things really well, you might survive high velocity throwing.
So even higher than 85 miles per second.
Yeah.
Per hour, sorry.
Per hours. Yeah. Like we've seen in American baseball, 105, maybe 108 with Nolan Ryan, they said. And that's because they are bigger, stronger, faster movers. They are optimized in their mechanics, and they were strong enough to keep their joints from ripping apart. Can we go above that? Of course. It's probably going to take a bigger, stronger, faster human being. Can someone not at the athleticism or the size of those 100-mile-an-hour guys achieve it? Maybe, but the only way they're going to achieve it is getting as close to the side speeds, mobility, and mechanics of those guys. So there's always going to be a better athlete that has an advantage to it. But the coolest thing is you can, through training, enhance the things that those elite athletes can do. And you never know, you might surprise yourself. That's what's so fun, because that's why we're able to help guys make huge gains that they never thought they make. Because the one thing you don't know is you don't know how well your body can adapt to this training and how it will adapt to this training it could surprise you by giving you really cool results, because we actually understand the science and the physics that make this happen.
Cool. Love this. Love this. So before I let you go, if there's like coaches, therapists that are interested in what we're talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
Hey, I really appreciate you having me on. It's an honor to have be on your podcast. And if they want to reach out, anything at Top Velocity, topvelocity.net. So just search Top Velocity, you'll find us.
Great.